I've always believed in the importance of establishing the provenance of the things that we assume appeared out of thin air when teaching or learning something new. Nothing comes from nowhere, like who invented the quadratic formula? René Descartes. I think, therefore I solve quadratic equations. Or, which came first, sine, cosine, or tangent? Likely sine, a mistranslation of a Sanskrit treatise from the 4th century CE. How kind, then, that the modern classroom has the sum total of human knowledge right at my fingertips, and a quick search engine dive into the life of Hipparchus or Madhava provides an answer to a fleeting question, and a quick reprieve for bored students who are always just a thumb swipe away from double-checking under their desks that TikTok hasn't disappeared in the last 5 minutes. But that, too, came from somewhere. We weren't born with Facebook accounts or phones in our hands. But when exactly does something change from being sociological, a part of our lives, to historical, a part of our past? There's an answer to that, actually. As historians, we generally consider something to be historical in nature when it's over 20 years old. In this year alone, everything from the spaceship Columbia to SARS to vaping and flash mobs and binge watching and MySpace and 4chan will pass from sociological to historical phenomena. No longer a fleeting curiosity, as if anyone in the last 5 years could have said so. Social media is now a genuine chapter of humanity's history, or at least a footnote. And if corporations like Meta or X are to be believed, then the metaverse is the title of the next episode. The metaverse, this persistent online virtual world marketed to us as one part Ready Player One, one part World of Warcraft, all parts the thing we have to go and do right now, often called Web3, which begs the question, if the metaverse is Web3, then what on earth happened to Web1 and Web2? It's an odd question to answer in retrospect because I was there. I don't know if it's just a truism about life in general or a stereotype of the millennial generation, but it really struck me when I hit adulthood that life is continuous. There's no sharp break between your childhood and your adulthood, just these slow, gradual changes over time that have you looking back one day saying, nobody owns a VHS player anymore, and the Nintendo Wii is considered a retro console, and the Tamagotchi is being sold to me through nostalgia, and Pokemon X just turned 10 years old. And you'd think at this point in my teaching career, I'd be okay with the fact that not everyone knows what I know. But I turn, as I do in these moments, to a concept established by the webcomic XKCD called the Lucky 10,000. Let's agree that we're all born knowing nothing, but also accept that there are things that, quote-unquote, everyone knows, like what the web was. In that case, there must be, on statistical average, about 10,000 people learning that fact every day. And how lucky are you to get to sit in the stuffy theater on a Saturday morning and learn that the nebulous cloud in the metal rectangle in your pocket has a history of its own? The internet was born, as far as its father Tim Berners-Lee is concerned, in or around Christmas Day, 1990, Sir Isaac Newton's birthday. The Berlin Wall had just finished falling, and out of the ashes of the old world, a new one was born. The first web browser was coded, and the first web page was published. The personal computer as a household item at the time was not super out of the ordinary, and people who could afford it could hook their computers up to a phone line and dial in, literally, to the World Wide Web. This was Web 1. Tech-savvy folks, professionals who could afford it, logging on to the internet for an hour or so a day, so long as no one picked up the phone, reaching out to each other in a new professional medium. I must have been around 3 or 4 years old when I was moved out of the nursery into my own grown-up bedroom. The nursery had a phone line and the most outlets in the house, so I was literally displaced by the internet. It's a bizarre cultural touchstone that I recall every night in my childhood, falling asleep to the sound of a dial-up modem connecting. It's this high-pitched screeching sound that really can't be replicated or explained, but for many people is remembered with a sense of fondness for a time that's long gone. But as time is wont to do, people got older, and as things are wont to do, stuff got cheaper. The internet became more reliable, easier to install and access. As the television and automobile before it, it went from an expensive curiosity to a household necessity. The children of professionals discovered the internet not as a professional space, I was 8 years old, but rather as a hangout, a hobby, a place to go. And crucially, we discovered that the internet was a place without any adult supervision, a place to go and do weird things and share weird stuff because there were no rules, there were no laws, and no one was watching us, and no one could tell us no. This was Web 1.5, a liminal space in the early to mid-2000s. You'd come home from school and log on to the internet to go and write on a bulletin board about your thoughts on the most recent episode of Dragon Ball Z, and then go and rewatch an episode of Potter Puppet Pals, and then email your friend a gif of a dancing baby because we were told it was a meme and you're supposed to share memes, and I don't know what a meme is, but sure. Because of limitations of speed and access at the time, the medium of choice was the image, text, the webcomic, handmade Flash animations. The weirder it was, the better. And it was so weird. And at the time, we joked with one another that if Web 1 was us talking to one another on the internet, and Web 1.5 was us sharing with each other on the internet, then whatever came next would be when we started talking to the internet. And then after that, when the internet started talking back at us. But what even would that be? But the future always arrives quietly. You don't realize it's dawn until the sun is already over the horizon. In the mid to late 2000s, it became a thing to start a web diary, a web log, or a blog for short, hosted on a website like Weebly or MSN Spaces or MySpace to share the mundanities of your day-to-day life with friends and family and anyone who stumbled across your page. What was originally billed to us as a social networking service in blogging soon began to dominate the internet. We called it the social medium of the internet, or later, social media, Web 2. And this person-to-person discourse really started to dominate online spaces. And then in June of my first year of university, I got pressured into making a Facebook account because it was this cool thing that all the young people was doing, and I had to get in. Now, I had my own blog at the time, hosted on a website called LiveJournal. When I was in high school, I joined a fan forum for this anime called One Piece that was hosted by the company dubbing it at the time. But when that company lost the license and folded, the website went dark, so we packed up and moved on to a different forum we hosted ourselves. And when we couldn't afford that, we packed up and moved on again to a website called LiveJournal, where your account would give you a blog, but also allow you to join community spaces, kind of as you were. There was this profound shift when you went from a bulletin board to a social networking site. All of a sudden, you could no longer reinvent yourself. You no longer got to reinvent yourself every time you went somewhere new. Yourself became persistent online. The first and last rule of the internet used to be never use your real name. But now that was the internet. And for me, the real change came when LiveJournal was bought and seemingly purged overnight. One day, the company decided they didn't want to host it anymore, and then it was gone. And such a thing was pretty commonplace in late Web 1.5, early Web 2. A host would fail to pay their monthly hosting fee or decide that they had lost interest in it. There were no monetization options in the early internet, not a lot of ads, and creating an account was free because they didn't know how to take your credit card. Social networking services weren't valuable enough to save when they went under. Must have been around 2010 when LiveJournal disappeared, and the choice of where to go next was either Tumblr or Twitter. And you know how these things go. But then something again seems to have shifted, particularly in the last 5 years. Web 2 has given way to Web 2.5, algorithmically dominated, AI-generated, corporate in nature. The monetization has arrived. Think of the carefully constructed YouTube thumbnail. Think of drop-shipped fast fashion. Think of arguments between strangers in an Instagram ad for powdered greens. I've heard Web 2.5 described as junkified, slowly filling up with AI-generated sludge for the purposes of directing our attention towards an ad or to purchase a product. And I'm not sure I like the direction it's gone. Think of that 30 or 40 word title on a Temu ad for a cheap product that's meant to search engine optimize your attention onto that product. Think of how everything these days seems to be called content. Think about how Facebook used to be a great place for connecting with friends and family and organizing events, and these days just seems to be a bunch of clickbait links to websites filled with ads stolen from Reddit. That, to me, is Web 2.5. And out of this bizarre cultural landscape, we're told that Web 3 is ready. We're going to cut our physical tether and move on to the metaverse. But the metaverse seems to be stalling at the gates. Every attempt to make it is just Second Life but worse, a bad video game where the avatars don't have any feet. And it doesn't matter how many tens of billions of dollars they throw at it, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of interest. I think what happened is we all kind of picked up, particularly after what happened in March of 2020, when we moved our schools onto Zoom, that the internet as it is right now is just not a great place to live. See, the problem to me is that the internet can't be forced to move in a certain direction. We think of it as tech, and we imagine its change as technological change, driven by innovators and engineers, and that's true in a sense. But the internet is a social space. It's a social sphere and probably the greatest social experiment of all time. And the thing about people in social situations is that we're contrary by nature. If you tell us to do something, there's the instinct to resist. If you create authority, there's the instinct to rebel. And if you tell me to buy a plot of land in the metaverse, I will buy a cabin in the woods. Don't sell me the internet. I am already there. Now, I am only one person, and I am not even the most dialed in. I'm just a high school math teacher. I can stand up here in front of you and tell you that Web3 won't be the metaverse, and in 10 years I might look like an absolute fool. But I can't predict the future any more than I can sell it to you, nor can I buy back the past. The internet of my childhood, as strange and wonderful a place as it was, is gone. It was deleted, and it is never coming back. But, as a history professor once explained to me, if we know our past, we can understand our present. And if we understand the present, we can decide where we're going. The internet didn't always look like this, and it doesn't have to look like this. For the vast majority of its life, it was determined by its end users. People like you or I putting stuff out there because we could. Because quite frankly, right now, the internet isn't really a hobby. It's not really a hangout. Sometimes I feel like it isn't even all that fun. And if the internet right now isn't that fun, maybe it's time to ask ourselves, what could we make of it instead? Thank you.